The massive space station hung in the darkness like a glowing metal city. Kepler Trade Station was bigger than most human cities back on Earth. Ships from dozens of different worlds came here to buy and sell goods. The station spun slowly too. Create artificial gravity, its lights twinkling against the black space. Ambassador Han-Wu stood at the viewing window of the human diplomatic quarters. He was a tall man with graying hair and kind eyes. Today was supposed to be the most important day of his career. After 3 long years of talks and meetings, humans were finally going to sign a trade agreement with the Vicari Empire. The Vicari were not like humans at all. They stood 8 feet tall with purple scales covering their bodies. Their faces looked like angry lizards with sharp teeth and bright yellow eyes. Most aliens in the galaxy feared the Vicari because they were known for being violent and aggressive. They controlled over 40 star systems and had one of the strongest military forces in known space, but humans needed this trade deal. Earth was running low on rare metals that were needed for their growing space fleet. The Vicari had plenty of these metals on their worlds. In return, humans would share their medical technology with the Vicari. It seemed like a fair trade that would help both species. Han-Wu checked his watch. The signing ceremony would begin in 1 hour. He had practiced his speech many times. Everything had to be perfect. This deal would open up new possibilities for humanity among the stars. Marine Sergeant Tae-jin entered the room. He was a young man with a serious face and strong build. His dark blue uniform was perfectly clean and pressed. On his chest were several medals he had earned during his 5 years of service. Tae-jin was the leader of the security team that protected the human diplomats. "Sir, the Vicari delegation has arrived," Tae-jin reported. "They are waiting in conference room 7. Han-Wu nodded. "How do they seem today?" "The same as always, sir," loud and demanding. Commander Veltar was shouting at the station workers about the temperature in their quarters. This was normal behavior for the Vicari. They complained about everything. The food was wrong, the rooms were too small, the gravity was not right. Han-Wu had learned to ignore their complaints and focus on the important business. Ji-hai, the ambassador's young assistant, came into the room carrying a tablet. She was smart and worked very hard. Han-Wu trusted her completely. "Ambassador, I have the final documents ready for signing," she said. "Everything looks good." "The legal team has checked every word 3 times, Han-Wu smiled. "Excellent work, Ji-hai. Let us go make history." The group walked through the long corridors of the space station. Other aliens stopped to stare at the humans as they passed. Some had never seen humans before. Earth was still new to galactic politics. Most species saw humans as weak newcomers who would not last long among the stars. Conference room 7 was the largest meeting room on the station. The round table in the center could seat 30 beings from different worlds. Today, only humans and Vicari would be present. The neutral Cathara station managers would watch to make sure everything was legal. The Vicari delegation was already seated when the humans arrived. Commander Veltar sat at the head of the table. He was bigger than the other Vicari, with darker purple scales and more scars on his face. His yellow eyes watched the humans with obvious dislike. "You are late," Veltar growled in his rough voice. The translator device on the table turned his words into English. Han-Wu checked his watch. They were actually 5 minutes early, but he did not argue. "My apologies, Commander." "Shall we begin?" The ceremony started well. Both sides read their prepared statements. The documents were placed on the table for signing. Han-Wu spoke about friendship between species and working together for a better future. Commander Veltar talked about Vicari, strength, and how humans should be grateful for this opportunity. Everything was going according to plan until Commander Veltar started asking new questions about the medical technology. He wanted to know exactly how human medicines worked. He demanded to see the complete formulas and production methods. "That information is not part of this agreement," Han-Wu explained calmly. "We will share the medicines themselves, but not the secrets of how to make them." Veltar's eyes flashed with anger. "Humans think they are clever. You want to keep us dependent on you." "Not at all, Commander. This is standard practice in trade agreements. We buy your metals, but you do not give us the locations of your mines. The Vicari leader stood up suddenly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He was much taller than any human in the room. His sharp claws clicked against the table as he leaned forward. "Humans are weak and stupid," he snarled. "You need us more than we need you. Change the deal, or there will be no deal at all." Hanlo remained calm. He had dealt with difficult negotiations before. "Commander, let us discuss this reasonably. Perhaps we can find a compromise that works for everyone." But Veltar was not interested in compromise. He began shouting in his own language. "The other?" Vicari joined in, hissing and growling at the humans. The translator could not keep up with all the angry words. Sergeant Taejin moved closer to Ambassador Hyun Woo. It was his job to protect the diplomat if things became dangerous. He did not reach for his weapon, but his hand moved near his belt where his stun pistol was hidden. "Sir, perhaps we should take a break," Taejin suggested quietly. Hyun Woo was about to agree when Commander Veltar noticed the Marine's movement. The Vicari's yellow eyes focused on Taejin with pure rage. "The human soldier dares to threaten me," Veltar roared. "There is no threat here," Hyun Woo said quickly. "Sergeant Taejin is simply doing his job." But Veltar was beyond reason now. In Vicari culture, any movement toward a weapon during talks was considered a deadly insult. He stepped around the table toward the humans. His claws were extended and his teeth were showing. Taejin moved to put himself between the angry alien and the ambassador. This was what he was trained to do. Protect the diplomat at all costs. "Step back, sir," Taejin said firmly but politely. Let us return to the negotiation." What happened next shocked everyone in the room. Commander Veltar raised his massive clawed hand and struck Sergeant Taejin across the face with tremendous force. The blow sent the Marine staggering backward. 4 deep cuts opened on his cheek, and blood began flowing down his face. The room fell completely silent. The other Vicari looked surprised. Even they had not expected their commander to attack during a diplomatic meeting. The Kithara station managers stared in horror. Taejin touched his bleeding face but did not fall down. He stood straight and looked directly at Commander Veltar. His eyes showed no fear, only cold anger. Hai gasped and immediately activated her emergency communicator. The device would send a distress signal directly to Earth, letting them know that the diplomatic mission was in danger. Ambassador Han Will looked at the blood on his Marine's face and felt something cold settle in his stomach. He knew this was no longer about trade deals or diplomacy. This was about something much more serious. Commander Veltar laughed loudly. The other Vicari joined in, thinking the whole situation was funny. They had put the weak humans in their place. "Now you know who is truly in charge here," Veltar said with satisfaction. "Humans will learn to show proper respect." But as the Vicari continued laughing, they failed to notice the small red light blinking on Jihai's communicator. The emergency signal was already racing through space toward Earth, at faster than light speed. They had no idea what they had just set in motion. The emergency signal traveled through space faster than anything else in the universe. It jumped from one communication relay to another, crossing hundreds of light years in seconds. The message was simple but urgent: human diplomat in danger. Marine attacked. Immediate assistance required. Admiral Dong Hyeon was drinking coffee in his office at Luna Command when the alert came through. Luna Command was built inside the moon itself, protected by thick rock and heavy armor. It was the heart of human military operations in space. From here, Earth's fleet commanders could reach any human ship or base in the solar system. The Admiral was a veteran of many battles. He had fought against space pirates and hostile aliens for 20 years. His hair was gray now, and his face showed the lines of someone who had made many hard decisions. But his eyes were still sharp and alert. The emergency beacon made his computer screen flash red. Dong Hyeon set down his coffee cup and read the message. His expression grew dark as he saw the details. A Vicari commander had struck one of their Marines during a peaceful diplomatic meeting. "Computer, initiate emergency protocol 7. He said in a calm voice. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout Luna Command. Emergency Protocol 7 meant that human military personnel were under attack. Every ship captain, every base commander, every marine unit in the solar system would receive the alert within minutes. Dong Haiyan pressed a button on his desk. "Get me General Sujin immediately." General Sujin commanded all Earth Defense Forces. She was on Mars, inspecting the new military bases there. A communication came through in seconds. "Admiral, I just received the alert," Sujin said. Her voice was steady but angry. "What exactly happened?" "A Vakari commander struck Sergeant Taejin during the trade negotiations," Dong Haiyan replied. "The Marine was protecting Ambassador Haiyan Wu. When the alien attacked him," Sujin was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was ice cold. "They hit one of our Marines during a diplomatic mission. Yes, General. Send me everything we have on Vakari military positions near Kepler Station. I want to know every ship, every weapon, every tactical advantage they might have, already being prepared, General." Within 3 minutes of the emergency alert, every major human military leader was connected in a secure conference call. Captain Min Ho of the Dreadnought Soul's Revenge was conducting training exercises near Jupiter. Captain Yungfi of the carrier Inchin's Pride was patrolling the asteroid belt. Captain Junho of the stealth frigate Ghost of Jeju was near Saturn, disguised as a merchant ship. The holographic display in Luna Command's main operations room showed the entire solar system. Red dots marked human military vessels. Blue dots showed civilian ships. Green dots were friendly alien vessels. And now, far outside the system, a yellow dot marked the location of Kepler Trade Station. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Dong Haiyan said to the assembled fleet commanders, 37 minutes ago, Commander Veltar of the Vakari Empire struck Marine Sergeant Taejin during a diplomatic meeting. This was an unprovoked attack on a United States Marine in the performance of his duties. The response was immediate and angry. Captain Minho's voice came through the speakers first. "Sir, Soul's Revenge is ready for immediate deployment. My crew can be at battle stations in 10 minutes. Inchin's Pride is also ready, Captain," Yunji added. "My fighter squadrons are already running pre-flight checks." Admiral Dong Haiyan looked at the tactical display. Intelligence reports showed 12 Vakari heavy cruisers in the Kepler system. They were powerful ships with advanced weapons and thick armor. Most alien species would think twice before challenging such a force, but humans were not most alien species. "Sir," came another voice. It was Commander Young-soo, leader of Destroyer Squadron 7. "My ships can be ready to jump in 15 minutes. We have been running combat drills all week." General Sujin's image appeared on the main screen. She was standing in the command center on Mars, surrounded by tactical displays and busy officers. "Admiral, what is our response doctrine for this situation?" Dong Haiyan did not hesitate. "The doctrine is clear, General. An attack on one Marine is an attack on all Marines. An attack on all Marines is an attack on humanity itself." This was not just military talk. It was the core belief that held human forces together. No matter where they served, no matter how far from Earth they traveled, every human in uniform knew that their brothers and sisters would come for them if they were in danger. Captain Hey, one of the science vessel Dokdo's Discovery spoke up from her position near the outer planets. "Admiral, my team has complete technical data on Vakari ship designs. We know their weapons, their armor, their weak points. This information has been sent to all combat vessels. This was the advantage that humans had over their enemies. They studied everything. Every alien ship that came near human space was carefully observed and analyzed. Human intelligence officers learned the strengths and weaknesses of every potential threat." "Excellent work, Captain," Dong Haiyan replied. "All ships prepare for immediate deployment to the Kepler system." But there was one voice that had not been heard yet. Colonel Wu Jin commanded the Marine Battalion aboard the assault ship Pohang's Fury. His ship was designed for one purpose: putting Marines on enemy stations and planets quickly and safely. "Admiral," Colonel Wu Jin said, "my Marines are ready." We have been training for station assault operations for 6 months. We know the layout of Kepler Trade Station better than the people who built it. Dong Haiyan smiled grimly. Human Marines, trained for every possible situation. They had detailed plans for assaulting space stations, capturing enemy ships, and fighting in zero gravity. What most aliens saw as impossible challenges, Marines saw as interesting training exercises. How long before your forces can reach the Kepler system? General Sujin asked. 23 minutes for the fast ships, Gong Haiyan replied. 31 minutes for the heavy units. The room fell silent as everyone considered this. In less than half an hour, a full human battle fleet would arrive at Kepler Trade Station. The Vicari had no idea what was coming their way. Captain Minho's voice broke the silence. Sir, Sol's Revenge is jumping to hyperspace now. See you at Kepler Station. One by one, the other ship commanders reported their departure. Captain, Unji's carrier jumped with its full complement of fighters. Commander Youngsu's destroyers vanished into hyperspace in perfect formation. Colonel Wujin's assault ship disappeared with its load of angry Marines. Within 10 minutes of receiving the emergency signal, 17 human warships were racing through hyperspace toward the Kepler system. They carried enough firepower to destroy entire fleets. Their crews were trained to the highest standards in the galaxy. Their Marines were ready for battle. Admiral Dong Haiyan watched the tactical display as the last ship jumped away. The solar system suddenly seemed very quiet, but he knew that in less than an hour the quiet would be broken by the sound of human weapons firing in anger. He picked up his coffee cup and took a sip. The coffee had grown cold, but he barely noticed. His mind was already at Kepler Station, where Sergeant Taejin stood bleeding but unbowed. The Vicari had made a terrible mistake. They were about to learn why attacking a human marine was considered one of the most dangerous things you could do in the galaxy. Computer, send a message to Earth Command, Dong Haiyan said quietly. Tell them we are responding to an attack on our personnel. Full military response authorized. The message would reach Earth in minutes, but by then it would not matter. The human fleet was already on its way to show the galaxy that humanity protected its own, no matter what the cost. Space around Kepler Trade Station was peaceful and quiet. Merchant ships from different worlds moved slowly between the docking bays. The massive station rotated gently, its lights reflecting off the hulls of visiting vessels. Everything seemed normal. Then reality tore open. The first human ship to arrive was Captain Minho's dreadnought Sol's Revenge. It was a kilometer long and covered in heavy armor and weapons. The ship emerged from hyperspace in a flash of blue light, its massive engines glowing like tiny stars. Before the station's sensors could fully register the first arrival, more ships appeared. Captain Yunji's carrier Inchin's Pride materialized, with fighters already launching from its bays. The destroyer squadron led by Commander Youngsu came through in perfect formation, their weapons already charging. Within 60 seconds, 17 human warships had surrounded Kepler Trade Station. They moved with the precision of a dance that had been practiced 1,000 times. Each ship took its assigned position, creating a sphere of steel and firepower. Around the station's traffic control center erupted in panic. The Cathara beings who managed the station had never seen anything like this. Their insect-like faces showed pure terror as they watched their sensor screens fill with unknown contacts. Unknown fleet? This is Kepler Station Traffic Control? Came the frightened voice over the radio. You are in violation of neutral space protocols. Please state your intentions immediately. The response came from Admiral Dong Haiyan's flagship, the heavy cruiser Guangzhou's Thunder, which had just arrived with the second wave of ships. His voice was calm but carried the weight of absolute authority. Kepler Station, this is Admiral Dong Haiyan of the Terran Defense Fleet. We are here on official business. Prepare to receive our diplomatic team. Inside the station, the Vicari delegation was still in conference room 7. They had been celebrating their victory over the weak humans when the lights began flashing red. Emergency alarms started sounding throughout the station. Commander Veltar looked around in confusion. What is this noise? One of his subordinates, Captain Colven, was listening to his communication device. His purple face went pale. "Commander, there are human warships surrounding the station, many ships." "Big ships," Veltar laughed. "Impossible. Humans are weak. They would not dare challenge the Vicari Empire." But even as he spoke, he could see through the conference room's window. The running lights of human ships were visible in the darkness, moving in formation around the station. There were so many of them that they looked like a constellation of angry stars. Ambassador Hyan Wu was still in the room, along with the injured Sergeant Taejin and Assistant Ji-hai. The ambassador's face showed no expression, but his eyes were cold. He watched Commander Veltar with the look of someone who knew that justice was coming. "Perhaps now would be a good time to discuss an apology," Hyan Wu said quietly. Veltar's yellow eyes flashed with anger. "Humans do not frighten the Vicari. We have 12 heavy cruisers in this system. We will destroy your pathetic fleet." On the bridge of Soul's Revenge, Captain Minho was studying the tactical display. The Vicari ships were spread throughout the system, conducting routine patrols. They were powerful vessels, each one capable of destroying several smaller ships. But they were not ready for battle. "Sir," reported his weapons officer, Lieutenant Kyung-ho, "Vicari vessels are moving to intercept us. They are charging weapons and raising shields." Minho nodded. "Let them come." "Have all ships received a tactical data package?" "Yes, sir. Captain Haewon's intelligence reports have been distributed to the entire fleet. We know everything about their ship designs, weapons, and defensive capabilities." This was the advantage that humans had spent years developing. While other species relied on superior firepower or advanced technology, humans relied on information. They studied their enemies until they knew them better than the enemies knew themselves. On the carrier Incheon's Pride, Captain Yoonji was watching her fighter pilots prepare for launch. Lieutenant Jin-woo was the squadron leader, a young pilot with over 200 combat missions. His fighter was loaded with weapons specifically designed to penetrate Vicari armor. "Phoenix Squadron, this is Control," Yoonji said into her headset. "You are cleared for combat patrol. Remember, we know exactly where to hit them to make it hurt." Jin-woo's voice came back confident and calm. "Roger, Control. Phoenix Squadron is ready to show these lizards what human pilots can do." Meanwhile, Colonel Wu Jin was preparing his Marines aboard the assault ship Pohang's Fury. His troops were sealed in their powered armor, checking their weapons one final time. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were the elite of the elite, trained for the most dangerous missions in space. "Listen up, Marines," Wu Jin said to his assembled troops. "One of our brothers was attacked during a peaceful mission. The enemy thinks they can hurt a Marine and walk away. Today we teach them that Marines take care of Marines." The response from his troops was immediate and loud. "Ura, Colonel." Back on the station, the Kithara traffic controllers were becoming more desperate. Their neutral status was supposed to protect them from military conflicts. Now they were caught in the middle of what looked like the beginning of a war. "All ships, please withdraw from the station area," they broadcast on all frequencies. "This is neutral territory. Military action is forbidden by galactic law." Admiral Dong Hyan's response was polite but firm. "Station Control, we are not here to harm neutral parties. We are here to collect individuals responsible for attacking our personnel. Cooperate with us and no one else will be hurt." The first Vicari ship to reach the human fleet was the heavy cruiser Sword of Vengeance. Its captain, Relmore, was confident in his ship's abilities. Vicari vessels were known throughout the galaxy for their thick armor and powerful weapons. "Human ships, you will withdraw immediately or face destruction," Relmore transmitted. "You are outnumbered and outgunned." Captain Minho almost smiled at this. His intelligence officers had studied the Sword of Vengeance for months. They knew exactly how thick its armor was, exactly how powerful its shields were, and exactly where to shoot to disable it quickly. "Vicari vessel, you are ordered to stand down and prepare to be boarded," Minho replied. "This is your only warning." The response was predictable. Relmore opened fire with his main weapons, sending streams of energy. toward Sol's revenge. The human dreadnought's shields absorbed the attack easily. The weapons that seemed so powerful to other aliens barely scratched the human ship's defenses. "Sir, they have fired on us," Lieutenant Kyung-ho reported unnecessarily. "I noticed," Min-ho said calmly. "Return fire. Target their engine section. Disable but do not destroy." Sol's revenge responded with a single shot from its main cannon. The projectile was a solid piece of metal accelerated to incredible speed. It punched through the Vicari ship's shields and armor like they were made of paper. The Sword of Vengeance's engines exploded in a shower of sparks and debris. Within seconds, the mighty Vicari cruiser was drifting helplessly in space, its power systems failing and its crew struggling to survive. The other Vicari ships stopped their advance immediately. They had just watched one of their most powerful vessels disabled by a single shot from a human weapon. The confident communications from their captains suddenly became much more respectful. "This is impossible," Captain Colvin whispered as he watched the tactical display in Conference Room 7. "Human weapons are not supposed to be that powerful." Ambassador Han Wu looked at him with cold satisfaction. "Captain, you have made a serious error in judgment. You have attacked a member of the human military during a diplomatic mission. That is considered an act of war by my government." For the first time since the incident began, Commander Veltar looked uncertain. The confident laughter was gone from his face. Through the window, he could see more human ships arriving, including massive vessels that dwarfed anything in the Vicari fleet. The trap was closing around them, and they were beginning to realize that they had awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Admiral Dong Hyan stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. The human fleet had taken complete control of the space around Kepler Trade Station. Every Vicari ship was now within range of human weapons. Their movement had stopped after seeing what happened to the Sword of Vengeance. The Admiral checked his watch. 30 minutes had passed since Sergeant Tae-jin was struck. It was time to make the Vicari understand their situation. "Open all communication channels," Dong Hyan ordered his communications officer, Lieutenant Sung-min. "I want every ship, every station, and every person in this system to hear what I'm about to say." "All channels open, sir," Sung-min reported. Dong Hyan's voice echoed across space, reaching every vessel and every listening post within light years of the station. His words were calm but carried the weight of absolute certainty. "This is Admiral Dong Hyan of the Terran Defense Fleet. 30 minutes ago, Commander Veltar of the Vicari Empire committed an act of war by striking United States Marine Sergeant Tae-jin during a peaceful diplomatic mission. You now have 17 minutes to surrender the individual responsible for this attack, or we will demonstrate why attacking a human in uniform is considered an act of war against all humanity." The silence that followed was complete. Even the normal background chatter of merchant ships had stopped. Everyone in the system was listening. Inside Conference Room 7, Commander Veltar was no longer laughing. His yellow eyes darted between the window, where human ships filled the sky, and Ambassador Han Wu, who sat calmly with his hands folded. "This is madness," Veltar said, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Humans would not dare start a war over one soldier?" Han Wu looked at him with eyes as cold as space itself. "Commander, you clearly do not understand human nature. We do not abandon our people. Ever." Sergeant Tae-jin, still standing despite the blood on his face, spoke for the first time since the attack. "Sir, with respect, they do not know what they have done." The Marine's voice was steady and professional. The pain from his wounds did not show in his posture or his words. He stood like a soldier ready for battle, which made his statement even more frightening to the Vicari on the Vicari flagship Claw of Empire. General Kathrov was trying to understand how the situation had gone wrong so quickly. His ship was the largest in the Vicari fleet, armed with the most advanced weapons his people could build. But looking at his sensor readings, he realized that the human dreadnoughts were bigger and carried weapons he did not recognize. "How many human ships are there?" he asked his sensor officer. 17 confirmed, General. "But sir, their weapon signatures are unlike anything in our database." The energy readings are much higher than our intelligence reports suggested. Kethra felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Vicari intelligence had told him that human weapons were weak. The reports said human ships were small and poorly armed. But the vessels surrounding his fleet were massive and bristling with weapons that had already proven their effectiveness. "Contact Commander Veltar," he ordered. "Tell him to resolve this situation immediately." But Veltar was not interested in resolution. His pride had been challenged in front of his subordinates. In Vicari culture, backing down from a fight was worse than death. The fact that the humans had responded so quickly and with such force only made him angrier. "I will not surrender to weak mammals," he declared loudly. "The Vicari Empire does not bow to anyone." Captain Colven, who had been watching the tactical displays, tried to reason with his commander. "Sir, perhaps we should consider negotiation. The human response is much stronger than we expected." Veltar turned on his subordinate with fury. "Are you suggesting we show weakness? These humans think they can threaten the mighty Vicari with their little fleet. We will show them the price of challenging our empire." Meanwhile, Colonel Wu Jin was making final preparations aboard his assault ship. His Marines were ready for boarding action, their powered armor sealed and their weapons checked. Each Marine carried equipment specifically designed for fighting in the confined spaces of a space station. "Colonel," came the voice of Admiral Dong Hyan over the communicator, "you are authorized to prepare for a station assault. Rules of engagement are to secure all Vicari personnel involved in the attack." On Sergeant Tae-jin. "Understood, Admiral," Wu Jin replied. "My Marines are ready. We can have the station secured in 20 minutes once we begin boarding operations." The colonel looked at his troops, men and women who had trained for years to become the best soldiers in human space. They came from Earth, Mars, the moon colonies, and the asteroid mining stations. What united them was their dedication to protecting human interests and their absolute refusal to leave a fellow Marine behind. "Listen up, people," Wu Jin said to his assembled Marines. "We're going in to get our brother and arrest the aliens." "Who hurt him? Remember your training? Stay professional. But if they want to fight, we will give them a fight they will never forget." Captain Minho, watching from Seoul's Revenge, was monitoring Vicari communications. His intelligence team had broken their encryption codes months ago. He could hear the growing panic in their transmissions as they realized the size and capability of the human response. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, Lieutenant So Young, "Vicari Command is ordering their ships to take defensive positions, but they are hesitating to attack. I think they are finally understanding what they are facing." Minho nodded. "Good. Fear makes people more reasonable. How much time is left on the Admiral's ultimatum?" 12 minutes, sir." On the science vessel Dokdo's Discovery, Captain Haewon was analyzing the Vicari fleet formations. Her computers had been studying alien military tactics for years, learning how different species fought and how to counter their strategies. "All ships, this is Discovery," she transmitted. "Vicari vessels are moving into their standard defensive formation. Based on our analysis, they will attempt to protect their flagship while using their smaller ships to harass our flanks. Recommended counter-tactics are being transmitted now." This was another advantage humans had developed. They did not just build better weapons. They studied their enemies until they could predict exactly what those enemies would do in any situation. Lieutenant Jin Woo, leading Phoenix Squadron in his fighter, was excited to finally put his training to use. He had studied Vicari fighter tactics in simulation for months. Now he would see how well the real thing matched the computer models. "Phoenix leader to all fighters," he transmitted. "Stay sharp and follow the battle plan. Remember, we know their weaknesses. Use that knowledge." Back in Conference Room 7, the tension was building toward an explosion. Commander Veltar was pacing back and forth, his claws clicking against the floor. The other Vicari looked nervous, but they would follow their commander's orders even if those orders led to disaster. Ambassador Hyan Woo checked his watch. "Commander, you now have 8 minutes to make your decision. I strongly recommend that you consider the consequences of your actions." Veltar stopped pacing and glared at the human diplomat. You think your ships frighten me? The Vicari Empire has conquered 40 worlds. We have fought battles across the galaxy. Your pathetic fleet is nothing compared to our power. But even as he spoke these brave words, Veltar could see through the window that more human ships were still arriving. The latest arrivals were even larger than the first wave, massive vessels that looked like they could crack planets. Admiral Donghayan's voice came over the communicators again, calm and patient, but with an edge of finality. 7 minutes remaining. I strongly recommend you reconsider. The countdown had begun, and everyone in the system knew that when it reached 0, the galaxy would see exactly what happened when someone was foolish enough to attack a human marine. The clock was counting down, and everyone in the Kepler system could feel the tension building like a storm about to break. Admiral Donghayan's ultimatum had 7 minutes left, and the Vicari were finally beginning to understand the magnitude of their mistake. 7 minutes remaining, the Admiral's voice echoed across all communication channels. I strongly recommend you reconsider. On the Vicari flagship Claw of Empire, General Kethrav was studying his tactical display with growing horror. What he saw there defied everything he thought he knew about human military capabilities. The sensor readings showed weapon signatures that were far beyond anything in Vicari databases. Captain Zolkar, he called to his weapons officer, what are your computers telling you about those human dreadnoughts? Captain Zolkar's purple face had gone pale. General, our analysis shows that their main cannons generate energy levels. That should be impossible. The projectile that disabled the Sword of Vengeance was moving at 12% of light speed. Kethra felt his blood turn cold. 12% of light speed meant that the human projectile had carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. No wonder it had punched through Vicari armor like it was made of paper. How is this possible? He whispered. Our intelligence report said humans were technologically inferior. Sir, came the voice of his intelligence officer, I believe our intelligence reports were wrong, very wrong. On the human side, Captain Haywon aboard the science vessel Dokdo's Discovery was coordinating the intelligence analysis. Her computers had been monitoring Vicari communications and could see the growing panic in their fleet. Admiral, she reported to Donghayan, Vicari command structure is breaking down. Their ship captains are questioning orders and their sensor. Officers are reporting impossible readings from our weapons. I believe they are finally realizing what they are facing. This was exactly what Admiral Donghayan had hoped for. The human strategy was not just about superior firepower. It was about psychological warfare. Let the enemy see what they were up against and give them time to think about the consequences of their actions. Excellent work, Captain, Donghayan replied. Continue monitoring their communications. I want to know the moment they decide to surrender. But in Conference Room 7, Commander Veltar was still refusing to accept reality. His pride would not allow him to admit that he had made a mistake. Even as reports came in from his fleet about impossible human weapon capabilities, he continued to believe that Vicari superiority would win the day. They are trying to frighten us with fake sensor readings, he declared to his subordinates. Humans are weak. They always have been weak. This is just an elaborate bluff. Captain Colvan looked at his commander with growing concern. Sir, the Sword of Vengeance is barely functional. Their engines are completely destroyed. This does not seem like a bluff. One lucky shot, Veltar snapped. Nothing more. But Ambassador Hyung Woo, who had been listening to this exchange, decided it was time to educate the Vicari about human military doctrine. Commander, Hyun Woo said quietly, you seem to misunderstand something fundamental about my people. We do not bluff about military matters. Every human ship out there is capable of exactly what you have seen, and there are many more ships where those came from. Veltar laughed, but it sounded forced. Impossible. Humans have only been in space for a few decades. You cannot possibly have built a fleet capable of challenging the Vicari Empire. Commander, Sergeant Tajin spoke up, his voice steady despite the blood still drying on his face. Humans have been preparing for this possibility since the day we met our first hostile alien species. Every ship, every weapon, every tactic has been designed with one goal in mind: protecting human interests and human lives. The Marine's words carried a weight that made even the arrogant Vicari pause. Here was a man who had been struck and wounded, but who showed no fear and no doubt about the outcome of this confrontation. Meanwhile, Colonel Wu Jin was making final preparations for the assault on the station. His Marines were positioned in their boarding pods, ready to launch the moment the order came. Each pod could carry 20 Marines in full combat armor, and they could cut through station hulls in less than 30 seconds. "Colonel," came Admiral Dong Haiyan's voice, "you are cleared for preparation phase. Begin moving your assault ships into position." "Roger, Admiral," Wu Jin replied. "Pohang's Fury is moving to optimal boarding position. Marines are ready for immediate deployment." The assault ship moved slowly toward the trade station, its massive bulk blocking out stars as it approached. Other ships in the human fleet adjusted their positions to provide covering fire if needed. The movement was precise and coordinated, like a machine built for one purpose. Captain Minho, watching from Seoul's Revenge, was impressed by the discipline of the human fleet. "Lieutenant Ken Ho, what is the status of our weapon systems?" "All systems optimal, sir. Main batteries are charged and ready. We can engage multiple targets simultaneously if required." Minho nodded. The Seoul's Revenge alone carried enough firepower to destroy the entire Vicari fleet. But the goal was not destruction. The goal was to demonstrate overwhelming superiority and force a surrender without unnecessary bloodshed. On the carrier Inchin's Pride, Captain Yunji was coordinating her fighter squadrons. Lieutenant Jinwoo's Phoenix Squadron was already deployed in a protective screen around the station. The fighters moved in complex patterns, showing off their superior speed and maneuverability. "Phoenix Leader, this is Inchin Control, Captain," Yunji transmitted. "You are cleared to demonstrate advanced combat maneuvers. Show our guests what human pilots can do." Jinwoo's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Roger, Control. Phoenix Squadron, execute formation Delta 7. The human fighters suddenly accelerated to impossible speeds, weaving between the Vicari ships in patterns that defied the basic laws of physics. They moved so fast that the alien sensors could barely track them. It was a display of piloting skill that left the Vicari speechless. General Kethrov watched the fighter demonstration with growing despair. His own pilots were considered among the best in the galaxy, but they could never match what he was seeing. The human fighters moved like they were controlled by computers, but he knew they were piloted by living beings. "Admiral," he finally transmitted to Dong Haiyan, "we request immediate negotiations to resolve this situation peacefully." Dong Haiyan's response was polite but firm. "General, there is only one way to resolve this situation. Commander Veltar must surrender himself for trial. There will be no negotiations on this point." "But Admiral, surely we can discuss compensation or other arrangements." "General, a United States Marine was attacked during a diplomatic mission. This is not a matter that can be resolved with money or trade agreements. Justice must be served." Back in Conference Room 7, the communications between the fleets were being broadcast on the room speakers. Commander Veltar could hear his own general trying to negotiate with the humans. The sound of defeat in Kethrov's voice finally began to penetrate his arrogance. "Sir," Captain Colvin said quietly, "perhaps it is time to consider surrendering. The humans have shown that they are serious about this matter." Veltar's yellow eyes flashed with fury. "Never. I would rather die than surrender to weak mammals." But even as he spoke these words, Veltar could see through the window that the human assault ship was now directly outside the station. Its massive hull filled the entire view, and he could see the boarding pod launchers pointed directly at the station's hull. Admiral Dong Haiyan's voice came over the communicator one final time before the deadline expired. 3 minutes remaining. Commander Veltar, this is your last opportunity to surrender peacefully. After that, we will consider all Vicari personnel to be hostile combatants." The countdown was almost over, and everyone in the system knew that The next few minutes would determine whether this ended with a surrender or with the galaxy witnessing the full fury of human military power unleashed against those who dared to harm one of their Marines. Time was running out, and the Vicari were about to learn that there were some lines that should never be crossed. The final 3 minutes passed in complete silence. Every person in the Kepler system held their breath, waiting to see what would happen when Admiral Dong Haiyan's ultimatum expired. The human fleet maintained perfect formation around the trade station, their weapons charged and ready. In Conference Room 7, Commander Veltar stood frozen with indecision. His pride told him to fight, but his survival instincts were finally beginning to work. Through the window, he could see the massive hull of the human assault ship, Pohang's Fury. Its boarding pod launchers aimed directly at the station. Time is up, Admiral Dong Haiyan announced calmly over all communication channels. Commander Veltar, you have chosen war over justice. So be it. But before the Admiral could give the order to attack, Veltar made one final, fatal mistake. His anger and pride overcame his reason completely. Human Admiral, he snarled into his communicator, the mighty Vicari Empire does not surrender to inferior species. If you want a fight, you will have one. The moment those words left his mouth, every Vicari ship in the system opened fire simultaneously. Energy beams and missiles streaked through space toward the human fleet. It was exactly minute 44 since Sergeant Taejin had been struck. The Vicari attack lasted exactly 3 seconds before they realized they had made a terrible error. The human fleet's response was immediate and devastating. Captain Minho's dreadnought Soul's Revenge fired its main cannon 3 times in rapid succession. Each shot was perfectly aimed at a different Vicari cruiser. The kinetic projectiles, traveling at significant fractions of light speed, simply erased the enemy ships from existence. 3 targets eliminated, Lieutenant Kyung-ho reported calmly. As if he were discussing the weather. Captain Eunji's fighters responded with incredible speed and precision. Lieutenant Jinwoo led Phoenix Squadron in a devastating attack on the Vicari flagship. The human fighters moved too fast for the alien defensive systems to track, weaving through the enemy's weapons fire like they were dancing. Phoenix leader to Incheon control, Jinwoo reported, his voice excited but professional. Enemy flagship's command section is neutralized. They are dead in space. The Vicari had expected a battle. What they got was a demonstration of superior technology, training, and tactics that left them helpless. Their proud fleet, which had conquered 40 worlds, was being systematically destroyed by an enemy they had thought was weak and inferior. General Kethrov watched his tactical display in horror as ship after ship disappeared from his screens. The humans were not just winning. They were dominating so completely that it looked like a training exercise rather than a real battle. All ships retreat immediately, he ordered desperately. Jump to hyperspace now, but it was too late. Commander. Youngsu's destroyer squadron had already moved to cut off their escape routes. The Vicari ships that tried to flee found themselves trapped by human vessels that were faster and more maneuverable than anything they had ever encountered. This is impossible, Kethrov whispered as another of his cruisers exploded under human fire. How can humans be this powerful? The answer was simple, though the Vicari would never understand it. Humans had prepared for this day since they first met hostile aliens. Every ship, every weapon, every tactic had been designed with one goal: protecting human lives and interests. When someone attacked a human marine, they were not just fighting one soldier. They were fighting the combined will and fury of an entire species that refused to abandon their own. Meanwhile, Colonel Wu Jun's Marines were already in action aboard the trade station. The moment the shooting started, his boarding pods had launched from Pohang's Fury. They cut through the station's hull in seconds, and his Marines poured through the breaches in perfect formation. The station's security forces tried to resist, but they were armed for dealing with merchant disputes and smugglers, not for fighting elite human Marines in powered armor. The human soldiers moved through the corridors like an unstoppable force, their weapons and training giving them every advantage. Conference Room 7 secured, reported Sergeant Hakjin over the radio. We have the Vicari delegation in custody. Colonel. Wu Jin smiled grimly as he listened to the reports from his squads. His Marines had taken control of the entire diplomatic section of the station in less than 10 minutes. There had been some resistance, but it was quickly overcome. In conference Room 7, Commander Veltar was now face-to-face with human Marines in full combat armor. Their weapons were pointed directly at him, and their helmeted faces showed no emotion. He finally understood that his war was over before it had really begun. "Commander Veltar," Colonel Wu Jin said as he entered the room, "you are under arrest. For assault on a United States Marine during a diplomatic mission, you will be taken to a human vessel for trial." Veltar looked around the room desperately, but there was no escape. His subordinates had already surrendered when the Marines burst through the door. Captain Colvan looked relieved that the fighting was over. "This is illegal," Veltar protested weakly. "I have diplomatic immunity." Colonel Wu Jin's response was cold and professional. "Diplomatic immunity does not cover assault on military personnel. You lost that protection the moment you struck Sergeant Taejin." Ambassador Hyenwu stood up slowly, brushing dust from his suit. He looked at Commander Veltar with satisfaction. "Commander, you have learned today that humans do not forgive attacks on our people. I hope your empire remembers this lesson." Sergeant Taejin, still standing despite his wounds, looked directly at Veltar. "Sir, you should have just apologized." Outside, the space battle was already over. The entire Vicari fleet had been destroyed or disabled in less than 4 minutes. Not a single human ship had been seriously damaged. The demonstration of superior firepower was so complete that other alien species throughout the galaxy would talk about it for decades. Admiral Dong Hyen's voice echoed across all frequencies one final time. "This is the consequence of harming a human Marine. Commander Veltar and his subordinates are now in human custody. The station is secured. Any questions?" The silence that followed was absolute. Every species in the galaxy had been listening to the emergency broadcasts. They had all heard what happened when someone was foolish enough to attack a human soldier. General Kethrov, floating in an escape pod after his flagship was destroyed, transmitted a message to the human fleet. "Admiral Dong Hyen, the Vicari Empire formally surrenders. We request mercy for our surviving personnel." "General," Dong Hyen replied, "your surviving personnel will be treated according to the laws of war. They will be returned to your territory unharmed, but Commander Veltar will face trial for his crimes." Captain HFY Sci's vessel was already broadcasting the full recording of events to every major news network in the galaxy. Within hours, the story would be known everywhere. The species that had thought humans were weak had learned otherwise. In the most dramatic way possible, the incident became known throughout the galaxy as the 47-minute war. It was the shortest and most decisive military action in galactic history. From the moment Sergeant Taejin was struck to the moment the last Vicari ship surrendered, exactly 47 minutes had passed. Sergeant Taejin was taken to the medical bay aboard Soul's Revenge, where his wounds were treated. The cuts on his face would heal completely, leaving only small scars that he would wear with pride for the rest of his life. He was awarded the Galactic Service Cross and promoted to Staff Sergeant. When asked about the incident later, Taejin simply said, "I knew my brothers and sisters would come for me. That is what Marines do for each other." Commander Veltar was tried by a human military tribunal and sentenced to 10 years in prison for assault on military personnel during a diplomatic mission. The Vicari Empire issued a formal apology and established new protocols to ensure the absolute safety of human diplomatic personnel. The lesson echoed throughout the galaxy: humanity protects its own, and the consequences of testing that resolve are swift, decisive, and absolute. No alien species would ever again make the mistake of thinking that humans were weak or that they would abandon their people. The 47-minute war proved that sometimes the smallest spark can ignite the greatest fire, and that some lines should never be crossed, no matter how powerful you think you are.